You know, when you understand how deep American propaganda about other countries is, it's kind of terrifying when you're confronted with not just the truth, but with the implications for what that propaganda does to the people in those countries. Driving into the studio this morning, I was listening to Democracy Now! And I only do that because the program comes on as part of the scheduling for my favorite Pacifica radio station here in D.C., which is WPFW 89.3 FM, appropriately known as Jazz and Justice Radio. But this morning, Amy Goodman was reporting on the elections in Nicaragua, parroting the U.S. imperialist line of Daniel Ortega not allowing free elections and arresting his opposition and repressing popular movements. She even had a woman on who she said was in exile from Nicaragua who called the elections theater and repeated the accusations of Ortega being a repressive dictator who props up those he wants around him in the elections. If I thought that Democracy Now! Didn't have liberal-leaning tendencies and a very pro-imperialist narrative, I would be one of those so-called leftists who easily believes the narratives such a stalwart and supposedly reputable alternative media source provides. I'll admit that I used to be until I knew better. But see, I'm not. I'm actually a radical who knows not only the history of struggle for true democracy under a leftist government that the U.S. has tried to destroy for decades, that the people of Nicaragua have been engaged in, but I also belong to organizations where my comrades are regularly called upon to witness these elections in some of these countries firsthand, to be observers to the true democratic process in these countries that the U.S. claims are run by authoritarian despots, and to bring back to the U.S. the true voice of the people. Such is the case with the Nicaraguan elections, where despite reports from Western media, Daniel Ortega is not running unopposed. There are several opposition parties running against him and the majority Sandinista National Liberation Front, or the FSLN. And that's the socialist political party that the U.S. has been trying to destroy since the Carter administration. The opposition parties on the ballot include the Constitutional Liberal Party, the Independent Liberal Party, the Nicaraguan Liberal Alliance, the Nicaraguan Christian Way, and the Alliance for the Republic. But if I were to believe, say, Al Jazeera, that says that the parties aren't really opposition parties, instead they are, quote, popularly called zancudos, or mosquitoes, small political parties with few known candidates who are friendly or allied with the ruling government, end quote. But I don't believe Al Jazeera, and you shouldn't either. Because all you have to do is literally Google those political parties and see that they are not at all friendly to the FSLN, nor are the parties obscure. The Nicaraguan Christian Way is a right-wing fundamentalist Christian political party. The Constitutional Liberal Party supported the dictator Anastasio Somoza Garcia, who ruled Nicaragua with his family with unspeakable brutality, especially against communist rebels, for 42 years, with the support of the U.S. government. The Nicaraguan Liberal Alliance is a center-right liberal conservative party with members of the Social Conservative Party and the Conservative Party of Nicaragua as members. Of course, we here in the U.S. wouldn't know about this because these political parties in Nicaragua aren't talked about. But that's why the internet is such a useful tool if you know how to use it for doing more than watching TikTok videos. Then there's the alleged repression of opposition forces that Daniel Ortega is committed by jailing his opponents. Well, most of the people seem to have been members of the Nicaraguan elite, members of about a dozen of the country's wealthiest families and businessmen known as the Gran Capital. Some supported Ortega in growing the economy, but it seems that it wasn't enough to have a successful economy in a country run by a Marxist government. But what Western media hasn't reported about those people was that they accepted money from foreign governments. And in Nicaragua, it is against the law to accept money from a foreign government if you are running for president. So those detained were accepting money from the United States. And that's why Ortega said there were coup plotters and Yankee agents attempting regime change. So while too many media outlets mischaracterize the elections in Nicaragua as theater orchestrated by a dictator trying to hold on to power, U.S. comrades on the ground are reporting the truth. Margaret Kimberly of Black Alliance for Peace and Black Agenda Report said, quote, the Garifuna, Creole, Mestizo, and Mesquito communities in this region managed polling with all candidates on the ballot. Strong support for government in a formerly neglected area. Education, transportation, healthcare improvements given as reasons for that strong support of the government. Literally everything said about the election in the U.S. corporate media is a lie. Ajamu Baraka, national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace, reports that in Nicaragua, students are given a week off to travel back to their hometowns to vote. There are multiple parties competing, while the U.S. has one capitalist party with two wings, while suppressing third parties like the Green Party. Nicaragua is a democracy. The U.S. is an oligarchy. Julie Verghese, editor of Toward Freedom, notes that people in Nicaragua are allowed to vote. The corporate media is lying about yet another country's democratic process because said country won't bow to the United States. They have been rebuilding their economy after the 2018 coup attempt and developing ties with countries and foreign corporations as they choose. Elections in countries like Nicaragua that the U.S. targets as undemocratic, or candidates who are leftists who threaten U.S. hegemony in other countries like in Honduras, or the backwards narrative supporting the TPLF coming out of Ethiopia by Western media are excuses the U.S. uses to continue its imperialist aggression against the democratic right to self-determination of other nations and of a people in those nations. We aren't guaranteed a right to vote in this country. And when we do, we get political gains and more tax breaks for the rich, but nothing more for the working class and the poor. But we're supposed to believe these people about how undemocratic another country is? I don't buy it, and neither should you. Follow Luqman Nation on patreon.com/LuqmanNation for lots of great content.